Alright guys, so today we're going to be jumping in and doing some more Minecraft stuff. Surprise. So we are working on here some artwork for Treasure Wars, and I figured I'd do another one of these, sit down, walk through it. You guys really responded well to the last one, and apparently it helped some of you, so I figured I'd do the same with this one. So I've slowed it down. It's not as fast as usual. I think the video will probably end up being about 20 minutes or so. So you might want to grab some popcorn or something to drink or something like that, and we'll crack in, and I'll start explaining what I'm doing. Alright, so the brief for this one was actually pretty easy, pretty relaxed. Most of the stuff for Treasure Wars is, if you didn't know, this was for Treasure Wars server, but yeah, it was for an event we had going on the weekend, and it was called the Warzone Wash Up, from memory. I think that's right. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, basically it was about loot. The gods sort of blessing certain loot crates within the war zone and putting more stuff in it. Originally it was like a wash-up thing, but because we were doing it sort of all over the world, it sort of made more sense to do it this way. So the concept was sort of like gear being blessed by the gods and falling into a crate. So that's why you can see me sort of drawing it here, falling into the chest. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure of straight off the bat, like I'll go through my thinking in terms of what I'm doing when I'm roughing things up here, and that was making the treasure chest super fancy and make it stand out. I wanted it to be the centerpiece. The other two things obviously was having Lachlan and Vic in there, and the lastly I wanted to make sure it was on the molten depths sort of feeling with the lava and fire, brimstone, all the good stuff. So those are the three things I was keeping in mind. So you can see right now I'm using the symmetry ruler, and that really helped for drawing the chest. And what it meant is that I could draw one side and it would mirror it on the other. Any of you guys who use Manga Studio frequently will probably know about the symmetry ruler and how awesome it is at certain times. And this was definitely one of those times where it came in and made it super easy. So once I'm happy with the rough concept that I got down there, or at least it's something to go on, I can sort of see how the composition is going to work, crack into doing the line work, and you can see me just drawing on one side and mirroring on the other side. Whilst the symmetry rule is great, it does have its limitations. So you'll see at times I'll turn it off and make sure that I've got some differences between the two, because too much symmetry doesn't always work. I've seen some people make it work really, really well. For me, it just doesn't seem to work. So I'm kind of mindful of that, and you'll see me sort of add a little bit more organic nature to it. But to make the chest stand out, I wanted to really add a lot of gems, so I knew those circles would be like gems sort of glowing. In terms of brushes, again, it's just a standard Yeti. It's my custom Yeti Inca, which is the Yeti Slanted. I had the link down below in the description for the Yeti brush, and I'll put up on screen right now the setting that I changed to give it an angle. I had a lot of you guys contact me and say, hey, what's the setting to put the angle on it? It's actually really simple. It's just one setting. I think it's direction. I'm not sure. I'll take a screenshot and I'll put it up on screen. So you should be seeing that now. So once I add that direction, it just adds like this slight little slant to it, and it means that my lines have a little bit of different feeling to it. I like it. Some people like it. Some people don't. It can screw up a little bit when you are using the symmetry ruler to color in, because it's got that angle on it. That angle is mirrored. No, isn't mirrored to the other side. So when you're coloring in on the edge of things, and then you look over the other side, you're like, hey, it went out of the line. That's because the brush has got an angle, but the angle isn't symmetrical. It's someone more mathematical would probably be able to explain why it doesn't work. But that's just one thing to keep in mind, super minor. But yeah, so I'm jumping in here and dropping down all my lines, and you can see I'm working on one of these boots here, and then what I'll do is I'll just take it and flip it. So this is one of the things I like to do to save time wherever possible. This was a bit on a tight time frame, so you can see I flip it, rotate it a little bit, and having it on that separate layer meant that I could just erase the parts that I needed to without losing the chest. But yeah, so now here's another way that I really, really love using the symmetry ruler. And that is swords. Swords I find, because they're already symmetrical, I can get fancy with one edge of the design. If I don't use the symmetrical ruler when I use it, my swords look all wacky and sorts of things. So, yeah, I love using it, even when the sword isn't going to be straight on. So you can see here what I do is I draw up the design, I sort of flesh it out a little bit. Okay, this is where I want it to be, muck around with this center area a little bit. get all the handle looking nice, and then once it's done, I can just rotate it and sort of use the perspective transform to just rotate it just a little bit to give it a bit more of a natural feeling. Definitely recommend it. I think it's a great way to draw swords and get them looking perfect each way, even if it's something like a really simple sword as well. I usually do it. One of the things that we're always trying to do is find ways to save time, and that's a great way that I found to save a little bit of time and have it work out all right. So we move on to the rocky ground area, and I mean, there's a few ways that I sort of approach environment stuff like this. You'll see some artists just able to sort of do like a rough outline and just paint it all in. Other artists who like to ink it all in, then shade it. And for me, I sort of use a combination of both. I will admit that I didn't really know the way that I was going to approach this ground when I started. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know the details, if that makes sense. One thing I knew that I wanted to have like that little bit of sort of glow coming up from the cracks, and sort of isolating this treasure chest on like an island with sort of cracks coming out. And I didn't know whether I wanted to do that with ink, with heavy lines, or whether I wanted to try and paint it in. I'm not the best at painting. I just can't seem to get my head around it that much. But so I mean, I went with the lines, and I went with sort of real heavy, sort of built it all up, and then I knew what I could do is I could go over the top and color down those lines to sort of nude it down a little bit, which you'll see I do during the color stage. But I always find it hard like drawing rocks, because my rocks always come out looking like non-organic, and you're trying to draw it so it does look organic. But in the end, I think it came out all right. I didn't put a lot of planning into this area though, so when it came down to the color time, you'll see that I'm really just trying to make it work. I'm just experimenting by throwing shadows in different areas and stuff like that. And in the end, it came along, but I probably would have liked to think about it a little bit more. But we'll see how it goes. One of the things I do when I'm drawing all these rocky and organic areas as well, and you see on those cracks, I'll like draw the crack, and then I sort of won't finish the line, but I'll let the line go, and then like a few little extra dots and stuff like that, sort of just breaking it up a little bit. I find that really sort of helps add to the sort of organic nature of the environment, if that makes sense. So now we start working on the characters, and at this point, characters, I could probably even get away without roughing them a lot of the time. I still do, just for process sake, but Minecraft characters, especially Lachlan and Vic, because I've drawn them so many times, it comes pretty naturally, so I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to do without even looking at the blue lines underneath. But sort of what I'm doing as I'm drawing, you'll see the canvas rotate a little bit as well. And the reason the canvas rotates so much is so, you'll find that certain lines are easier to do in different directions, whether it's been going down, from high to low, or from left to right. You'll find what feels natural to you, and especially if you add the slant to the brush, like I have, that'll also change things, because the way that the angle of the line is, if you are drawing, say, with this slanted brush left to right, it'll come out quite fat because of the direction of the angle. Whereas if you were drawing a line sort of, say, up to down, it might be a little bit skinnier, or sort of on an angle that matches the angle of the brush, it'll be a lot skinnier. So you see me rotate the canvas around quite a bit. So I'll lay in a lot of lines, and then we'll rotate, and I'll draw some strokes and stuff like that. That's so that I can rotate the canvas so that the thickness of the line kind of matches the feel that I want. My line work is very organic, sort of very natural and relatively thin. I see one of the, not biggest mistakes, but one of the things that I used to do, one of the things that I see a lot of newer artists who are always asking, hey, can you look at my stuff? So one of the things that I would always say is tone down your line weight. It can make a really big difference as well come color. But when I used to draw, my line work was like super thick, super heavy, and in the end it would just detract a lot from the color. So what I did is, over time, I've gradually sort of decreased that line weight down, had a bit more of a natural feel to it. And I really think that the line work itself has benefited quite a bit from that. So just something to think about. But yeah, so now I'm just going to throw in some background stuff. I could have just done some, the standard sort of silhouette mountains, but I decided to go with these little Minecrafty type mountains that I like to draw. I like doing them in sort of weird shapes, popping around everywhere. I guess it's a little bit Tim Burton inspired. It's sort of subconsciously maybe, sort of curvy, bendy, maybe a little Dr. Seuss in there. I'm not sure, but yeah. So after that, you can see I sort of filled in the background area and the sort of foreground area with just a flat color, just so I can mask that, as we spoke about in the previous videos, and then I can add the layer over the top and add the layer mask to it. You can already see that my line work for the rocks has been colored to like a darkish orangey brown. That color will change a little bit as well, but I've laid that in there at the moment, just so that I can get a feel for that. I don't want those lines to be super black. I kind of want the color there to sort of add the definition and the cracks and the highlights, and you'll see as we go along. But yeah, so now we're working on the chest. You can see this chest as well. Instead of going for the bright yellow gold that I usually use a lot, I wanted to give it a bit more of a worn down tarnished look. So I sort of took that gold and then brought it further towards the orange, but sucked the saturation out of it. So it's a little bit closer, a little bit duller to the grey area in the color wheel. But yeah, so you can see I was using the symmetry ruler for this as well, because I can. So you see I'm coloring on the left and the gems are coming up on the right. The gems themselves are just sort of laid in the red, and then it's kind of difficult when you're using red because you automatically want to highlight with that slide in towards the white, and it turns out pinky. So the way that I highlight red is always with orange, and then at its highest point, almost like a yellow, orangey yellow, and I find that works the best. What I do is where these gems are here, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I take that painter brush, which is what I'm using for a lot of the shadows and the highlights on the gems, but I go outside on the gold and I put a little white edge around the outside of where the gem sits. And what that does is it gives it that little bit of a beveled look. So all the gems have that dark edging around the side, almost like it's sunken in, and then that little white edging just gives it that little bit of depth. And it's just ever so subtle, but it does make a difference. So with the gold, I start adding some real deep recessed shadows, but most importantly, I take my white, I take a pure white with that painterly brush, and what's it called? The Josh Test brush, sorry, which I'll link below as well. And I start hitting like particular sections of the gold where I want it to sort of stand out. I don't hit the whole thing. I don't want to edge the entire thing with that white. I just want to hit certain areas. And then a lot of use of the airbrush as well. You can see those natural gradients in that gold. That's all done with the airbrush. So with the brown, again, very lucky. I can use a symmetry ruler. I add in some hard shadows with my liner brush, which is that slanted. Always my shadows are usually 99% done with that thick, heavy brush, because I like those shadows to be nice, dark and heavy. When it comes to wood grain, I actually have a few different ways that I approach it, and I don't really have any set way in mind. I sort of just go with the flow. But generally what I'll do is I'll take the wood, give it a flat color, lay in the shadows coming from, say, the brackets or anything like that. That's always first. And then I'll add in some little gradients. So with that wood, I sort of brought those colors up a little bit towards the center just to add a little bit of definition. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in those heavy, dark, which is almost, in fact, I think it's exactly the same color as my shadows, those heavy sort of swirls, and I'll do them first, and then along those swirls, I'll take a lighter color and I'll sort of outline it. You want to see me do that? So I sort of outline that wood grain. I can do a tutorial on wood grain at some stage, but a lot of people ask me to do it. The problem I haven't is because I don't really have a process. I kind of just go for it. But I mean, here, this is where I'm starting to add a little bit of lining. We wanted this chest to really glow and stand out, so I'm doing a layer above my line work and above my color. And the reason why is because if I do it above my line work, but I do it above my color, but don't do it above my line work, then those lines of the chest will cut through those. It will cut through those glows, and it won't really work. But what I did is I used a marquee selection to sort of angle off a few different areas, and then got that huge bit, just a really big airbrush, and just sort of brushed in from the bottom, fading out towards the top. And what it meant is it gave us sort of natural feeling coming out of the cracks. Do a few different of them, and then maybe just a little bit around the outside as well to give it that sort of glowy sort of feeling. So as I said, we start working in this environment. Down the bottom, I lay in my natural shadows with my airbrush first. That just gives me a little bit of something to work with. I know where the shadows are going to sit, mostly. But, I mean, at this point, I'm really experimenting. I don't have anything in mind, which is very weird for me because I usually know exactly what I want to do before I start. But here I was just like, okay, I'm not really sure how to pull this off, so I'm just going to fiddle around. And so I lay in some dark shadows, add in some gradients, lay in some more dark shadows. And sometimes this is the way that you got to work. You got to work by just mucking around and then figuring it out. It got a bit frustrating whilst I was doing it. I was like, I didn't really have, I think you find that sometimes you know exactly what you're looking for and you can picture it in your head and then you just try and replicate it. That's what I try and do most of the time. At this time, I really didn't have anything in my head at all. And I'd already been drawing for a few hours, so I was pretty exhausted, but I knew I had to get it done. So I just kind of just went with it. And it wasn't really working here, I felt. And then what I did is I started adding in this orange. So I just sort of started magic wanding some sections, adding in this orange here just to the edges, and then hitting it with like a light. Again, taking that Josh test brush and hitting those edges with that orange a little bit more. And then it all started to come together a little bit. I felt like it was starting to pop out. There was some depth to it, and it felt a little more natural and organic, and I really liked the way it was going. So once I saw that, I was like, okay, and sort of was able to go from there. But sometimes that's the way it goes. Like sometimes I can just do something and it just works, and then other times you got to sit there for like an hour and a half just trying to figure out, like, okay, what if I put this here? What if I put that there? Again, when it comes to these cracks here, you can see that I've painted in a lot more. I'm just using that Yeti Slender brush on my color layer to add in a little bit more depth, and then I'll also select those areas further away and add a little bit of that orange. See, I'm adding a bit of that orange with the airbrush there as well. It's almost like little reflected glows just to add a bit more depth there. I think overall, the chest and the floor took probably 70% of the color time, even though it only takes up 30% of the image. And that's funny because that can happen sometimes. Maybe the smallest detail in a piece which takes the longest amount, it may not even take up the majority of the piece here. So you can see that I'm spending a lot of time on this. I think this was the part that was going to sell it, was the chest and the glow and everything like that. I already knew what I wanted to do with the gear floating down from the sky, so I had that picture in mind. It was just making sure that I could sell the cracks in the ground and make it feel like a molten sort of lava type feeling. Here I add this yellow, and you can see what I'm doing is I'm painting it completely over the top of everything. It's over my line work, and it's over my color layer as well. It's on a separate layer. And then I just erase it a little bit so that line work sticks through and it's clear. The reason why I do it over the top is because otherwise you're dodging line work, but here it's removing the line work completely. But it's in a non-destructive way. Otherwise I'd have to erase my lines, and if I didn't like something, it just adds a lot more complication. Once I'm done with that, all I do is I lock the transparency on that yellow, and then hit it with the airbrush with little bits of orange, little bits of red and stuff like that. Just add a little bit of variation to it, and then take my cloud brush, which again, it's in the brush pack below, and Manga Studio brush pack. It's fantastic, this cloud brush, and just hit it around a little bit and add a little bit of glow to it. When it comes to the gear falling from the sky, I wanted to paint it kind of ethereally, sort of like not spirity. I'm not sure what the word is, but a little translucent. I didn't want to paint in just a standard gear. It just so happens as well that translucent sort of, the picture that I had in mind was Army of the Dead from Lord of the Rings. For anyone that's seen Lord of the Rings, sort of that sort of coloring, but a little bit more blue than green, so it had a bit of a diamond feel to it as well. You'll see what I also did to the line work. Again, I locked that line work layer, then basically painted that line work blue, so it all sort of matched down in the end and worked quite well. Before I went on to color that though, however, I wanted to just make sure the background was sitting okay, so I started filling in the background with certain bits and pieces and made sure that it all composited okay, and that my color palette that I was using, which was very analogous with all the oranges and browns and yellows, and then bang, the blue from the gear was supposed to stand out. So as we start to color in this sort of the gear that's falling down, I know what's in my mind. I know I'm just going to be pulling from palettes of blues and using the gradient as much as possible to keep it nice and soft, and then sort of hitting little highlights to make it sort of stand out. with the sword edges, it's very easy to do. When you've got an edge, what I do is I have my flat color, I marquee that selection just using the magic wand tool, and then I'll airbrush dark blue at one end, and then airbrush like a white at the other end, so give that natural gradient. And then the next section along that blade in that sword, I'll do the same in the same pattern. So it means that then the light will hit the lightest area where I airbrush the white, will hit the dark area in the other one, and that's like this natural gradient type deal to it, so you can see that there. Then once I've got all those sort of gradienty feels to it, you'll see me add in the dark blues. So I sort of add in some hard shadows along underneath the boots and in the helmet and in certain areas, just to give it a little bit more 3D and a little bit more depth. But I thought it'd be a great time now to go back to the previous video that I did. And as I said, if you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll answer them. And I saw two which stuck out to me, and also I'll try and answer them. The first one is a little bit easier, maybe, I think, if it's, I think I may have the answer to it, but we'll see. One of the questions was by K9 Dogster. It said, do you know a way to set brushes to darken only, like in Photoshop or GIMP? And I'm guessing you're referring to Manga Studio. So Manga Studio, every brush has its own settings and tools, and the way that you get to it is by hitting the little subtool. It's called Subtool Detail Palette, which is like a little wrench. I'll show a picture of it on screen. So if you click on that, it will bring up basically the subtool details, and more of basically breaks down the information. You can set like your brush tip, your texture stroke, all that sort of stuff. And there is under ink, there is an option for combine mode, so you can play around with your combine modes there, very, very similar to what you see in Photoshop. So you got your darken, multiply, screen. I'm guessing you're referring to multiply. I use multiply when I'm trying to add in shadows mostly, but there may be some other ones in there. You can have a play around with those. The other way to do it, which is a little bit easier as well, is that you can just do it on a new layer. And then all you really got to do is then set your layer property, which is in the drop down, very similar to where it is in Photoshop. Set your layer property to be whatever you want it to be, whether that be multiply, darken, soft light, all that sort of stuff. Anything Manga Studio doesn't have, which I wish it had, was a color blend mode. It doesn't have the color blend mode, so it does make it kind of difficult to do those color blends like you do in Photoshop. That's the one feature that I find missing and wanting every single day. I'm like, oh, I wish I had that. The second question comes from Alec East, and he said, how often are you switching between layers? One for each stage and then some, question mark. So, it's a pretty good question. The Pokemon piece that I put up on Twitter a few days ago, if you saw that, it's very full on and very colorful. You'd be surprised to know that I have a flat color layer, and then I have my shadows and highlights on the top layer. So it's literally 2 layers, pretty much the entire thing. I've got a video going up of that later, so I'll do another one of these for that, hopefully this week, maybe next week. So in that instance, I've got 2 layers for the entire piece, and I would probably say more full on than this one here. And so, and then in this one here, I've probably got my flat color layer, then maybe 5 or 6 that I can see in that palette there, maybe a few more down below. So I guess the way to answer your question is there isn't really any method to the madness. The chest, I kind of did that whole entire chest as one section. I did the ground as one section. One layer. I guess I feel if I need to go in and tweak it, then I'll keep it as a separate layer. So I know now, like if I want to add some shadows to that chest, I can go in with a multiply layer and just airbrush over it, and I'm not going to go onto the ground or anything like that. And I think the characters as well, I ended up coloring them separately. There's a few times here where I may have separated. I've done the red, new layer, done the skin tone, new layer, done the black on the shorts, new layer, done the hair, new layer. Then once I colored him in, I just bang, 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 merge it down. There's really no right answer to that. Whatever you feel natural with. Like, it does become harder when you start working with one layer, in a sense, because there's no way to going back. Yeah, I don't know. It's a trade-off. You'll find what feels natural. Some days I feel confident to color all on one layer and not worry too much. And then other times I feel like I need to use multiple. The other thing when it comes down to is if I have a reference layer underneath, and I'll go more into that when I do the Pokemon piece, because I got that flat colored by someone, and then I was able to jump in over the top of that. So I'll explain that a little bit more. But yeah, hopefully that answers your questions. If you have any more, again, leave them down here, and I'll answer them in the next question. I always go through and try and pull them out, and answer what I can, if they're not too tricky, that is. So that'll pretty much wrap up this piece, guys. I'll throw up a final screenshot at the end showing how it came out. I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys learned something from this. And if there's, if you want me to go into more detail about particular areas, again, just let me know. But yeah, it's been fun chatting again for another 20 minutes or so. So hopefully you guys didn't fall asleep and you got something out of it. But yeah, definitely got a couple more stuff planned. As I said, I recorded the entire process of that Pokemon commission that I put on Twitter, and then we also have the next in the How to Draw series, which will be Ray and BB-8, or BB-9, or BB-10, whatever his name is. I don't know. the little robot dude. So yeah, we'll be hitting that up hopefully this week when I get some time. Alright guys, thanks again for coming by, and see you in the next video. Alright, see ya.